Hello, I'm Dr. Leon Stutzman, aka Doc, with another one of these little videos designed to help you to get through these strange days in which we find ourselves, and these are strange days indeed. I woke up in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning. I had this strong sense of death. I've never experienced anything like it, or have I experienced anything like it since. It was like a heaviness, like a blanket just smothering me. I got up out of bed, went into the living room, sat down in my big leather chair, and I began to pray and intercede for about 3 hours until I finally fell asleep. I didn't get anything. I just felt death. I kept praying and rebuking the spirit of death. I got up the next morning thinking that was a weird night. Went to the office, and in the middle of the morning, I received a telephone call from Oklahoma. The family farm had caught on fire. In the process of this fire that spread out over a mile, didn't touch the farmhouse or the buildings, just burned everything else. In the middle of that fire, my mother was trying to move her Jeep, and I don't know how she did this, but she ran over herself. Broke a couple of ribs, cracked several more. In her 70s at that time, she struggled to her feet, went and draped herself across the propane tank where they found her, which, by the way, I'm not sure that's the best place to be when there's a raging fire, the propane tank. But she's draped across the propane tank. The paramedics found her, care flighted her to Oklahoma City. That's when we got the report. Of course, we went into immediate prayer, but I had been awake for 3 hours that night, rebuking the spirit of death. 6 weeks later, she walked out of the hospital just as normal could be, totally healed by the power of God. I told you that story to tell you that you need to learn to tune in. You are connected to the Spirit, but oftentimes you don't listen because you don't know how to tune in. When I was a kid traveling across Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, in those old beat-up cars that I drove back in those days, in the days when you had a single band radio, AM radio, I'd always leave after the service was over because I wanted to get back to Dallas as quickly as I could to see my girlfriend the next day, obviously. But those late night trips afforded me the opportunity to tune in to XERF, XEG, two great radio stations out of Guajira, Mexico. They played all the old-time Holy Ghost miracle revivalists that I liked to listen to back in those days because those are my roots. I learned to tune in. They were hard to get, but once you got it, you could just drive for hours listening to all kinds of interesting and oftentimes strange preaching. I learned to tune in. You need to learn to tune in to the voice of the Spirit. Paul said there are many voices in the world, and none of them are without signification. When you learn to tune into the voice of the Spirit, amazing things will happen in your life. How do you tune into the voice of the Spirit? Let me suggest one thing today, and then I'll pick up on this Wednesday and talk about this again on Friday. Practice the presence of God. When we did our first revival in Ohio, they sent a newspaper reporter to interview me because there are so many testimonies of miracles. We sat at a little coffee shop on the outskirts of town and talked for half an hour, concluded the interview, went on my way. When I read the newspaper article, it was a really nice article, favorable, talking about the miracles and the testimonies and what the reporter had seen and the photographer had seen when they actually attended the meeting. But he said one thing that stuck with me all these years. He said, I talked to Stutzman for half an hour and he talked like God was right there. Well, where isn't God? Let me say that again. Where isn't God? I'm talking to someone right now. You're going through a really tough time and you feel like the heavens are brass and God's not hearing. Where isn't God? David said, if I make my bed in hell, you're there. If I ascend into heaven, you're there. Anywhere you are, God is. You need to remember that. If God is everywhere, it's just a matter of tuning in. Just like those radio waves that are coursing through you right now. You're not tuned into a radio station because you don't know how to tune into a radio station. I've heard reports of people that have had mental fillings that have been able to tune into a particular station by their mental fillings, but that's few and far between, and I'm not sure that's a good thing. No, you're constantly being bombarded. Radio waves are going through you. You're just not suited to tuning in. But in the spirit realm, you are uniquely suited to tuning in. If you just learn to practice the presence of God, that's the very first step. I'll share some more things with you on Wednesday about how to get a word of wisdom, how to get a word of knowledge, because sometimes you need a word of wisdom, and sometimes you need a word of knowledge. That's divine wisdom and divine knowledge dropped into your heart. I'll talk about it on Wednesday. Next Sunday, at Aspire Church, I've got a word from God. It's a prophetic word. Prophetic Persuasion is the series I'm in right now. this Sunday outside the walls. Why? Because the prophetic always moves outside of the walls. You'll never find the prophetic moving inside the walls. Powerful stuff for people that want to prosper and prevail in these strange days in which we find ourselves. You can catch it on the live stream at aspirechurch.tv, Facebook Aspire Church TV. That's Aspire Church TV, Facebook, aspirechurch.tv live stream Sunday morning, 10 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. It is going to be powerful, and it will prepare you to prevail. I'm Dr. Leon Stutzman, a.k.a. Doc. Thanks for tuning in. Tune in again on Wednesday.